da ieri, Tommy? Ti è ubriacato?
No, ho bevuto una birra leggera. Però secondo me mi ha detto per dire.
Dove è arrivato e vedete? Sì, avevo portato
Ciao Mauri, mi senti? Mi sentirai tra 20 secondi. Tra un po'. Ma come
L'hanno arrestata?
pare che sia lo sbatto più grosso della storia.
Io quando me lo scusato io ho detto e quando mi ricordo più paura mi facevo minchia, a me a parte che l'inglese mi ha fatto subito stato che sono andato da casa e mi hanno seguito per studiare perché non ho passato quando qualcuno ha usato quei dati per fare qualcosa di simpatico. Minchia, hai visto sul deep web vedono i profili aggregati poi ti spiego. Allora c'è ormai arriva 17 poi chiede di nuovo il captcha e si blocca, però non è che tutte le volte la 17esima chiamata gli fa l'antischema.
Quindi sono le prima.
No, sono 19 elementi. No, l'alfabeto è bellissimo, ma Cioè sì, anzi, probabilmente sì, con la mia connessione che già non è velocissima. Cioè, tecnicamente, c'è tanta che ribalta però
Io comunque,
very scary, which needs context.
I think we are, I'm sure we are ready to start. There is not coffee yet, but will be served after. But as we are 3 minutes late, I would like to start. And some of you really arrived very early this morning.
Chiedi se qualcuno ha ancora bisogno. No, magari qualcuno ne ha ancora bisogno. Ah, ok.
So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Como, to Italy. It is wonderful venue. We have the pleasure to say keep alive in Politecnico di Milano. It's I didn't find many information about the building itself and its prices here. I'm sorry, I don't know what they represent. I think it's a kind of a visual representation. I don't know what data is based on. So, but it's a medieval settlement that has been completely rebuilt between the 17th and 18th century, and likely we can use it as Polytechnic especially for these kind of events, so for workshops and some schools, and that's good. So I will introduce briefly the workshop, the activity, and you will have some presentations this morning to, let's say, create the right context for the workshop. I'm Paolo Cioccolelli. I'm formally the leader of the working group 6 in the visualization, the cost action we are part of. And so I have the honor to introduce this workshop. First of all, let's see if you are all here. That's the official list of the members, the participants of the workshop. We divided in 3 categories: humanist researchers. Alex Badengaard, can you say something about you? Just very briefly, a few words for those who don't know you.
Yeah, okay, so I'm writing narrative history, who also works with digital media for interpretive purposes, particularly for engagement. So that's the direction that I'm coming at this one, rather than being the main expert in the public letters.
Okay, will you be here all the week?
I'll be here all week, and I'll be working with, I think, Guy Lazare. I look forward to meeting you all, hearing about your work.
Andrei Vorencic is not here.
He's joining later.
Joining?
Later.
Later, okay. Just to also get all the information about the people. Christopher Warren.
Hi, I'm Chris Warren, coming from Carnegie Mellon University in the States. I'm an early modernist with an interest in the Republic of Letters and also special interest in British social networks. The project that brings me to this group in particular, I've been working on for several years, called 6 Degrees of Fancy Speaking. This is my first event with Cost Action, so I'm eager to participate.
Did you have any previous relationship with designers? Just enough. First time?
Not the first time.
So you are accustomed, you are familiar with that. Okay. Yeah, it has been mentioned.
Yes, I'm here. I'm from the University of Windsor in Canada. The other Windsor, not the one in England. We are too. I'm traveling with a teammate, Cal Margu, who has been, who's the director of our Digital Humanities Center at the university, and he's been helping me out tremendously on this project on the Spanish Republic of Letters. I'm an early modern historian working on Spain and Spanish scholarship in the Renaissance, and yeah, we are very excited to be here, looking forward to see how I can help and work on the project.
Shall I, please?
Yes.
I'm a PhD student from the University of Luxembourg in Vienna. I'm working on one particular historian and his correspondence. This historian worked in the empire but had many contacts to France, Belgium, and some to Italy.
Okay. Ludovica Margucci.
She will be arriving later.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's Margherita Parigini.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Margherita Parigini. I study at the University of Geneva. I study literature, Italian literature from contemporary. And I'm here because my professor of dissertation made a project with the library, and I'm invited to participate.
Melia Anzik.
Yes, that's me. I'm from Sarajevo. I teach knowledge management, which is very generic and needs context. So this is for me a context, the humanities. Actually, I work on what we call at the moment some diplomatic correspondence to the Ottoman times. So if there is a chance, I will talk about that.
Mikael Jensen.
Yeah. I'm a PhD researcher from the European University Institute in France. Yeah, a dissertation on Nordic universities in the 18th century, university professors, intellectual geography. Looking forward.
Okay. Riccardo Bellingacci.
That's me. I'm studying in Utrecht. I'm actually a mathematician, but I had to do subject outside of mathematics, and I met Dirk van Leer in history of science, and he introduced me to that subject, and so it was a good combination to see with this scientific background. I hope.
And Sinet Uznak.
That's me. Hi. I come from Jerusalem. I teach in Bar-Ilan, the Hebrew University. I'm a postdoc at the moment. My field is the history of concepts, mainly early modern, but more generally too. And I'm a member of Group 3, interested especially in text reuse in correspondence and how to visualize them.
Good. And then we have the second part of component of this workshop is technology and design researchers. Angeles Briones.
Hello, I'm a PhD student in design. I'm actually working on the design labs, and so I'm coming from the
Yeah, most of the people, but not all, are part of the Density Design Research Lab at Polytechnic in Milano, but we succeeded, and I think that's really good to invite also other people that are not part of the lab. Also because we didn't have so many designers to front and to set up, and there are other people interested in data visualization for digital humanities, and I think that's good, and so you will see also other people. Azzurra Queen is not here. She's actually in Sheffield and she will join us in a couple of days. So she's part of the Density Design Research Lab. Carlo De Gaetano.
Hi, I'm Carlo. I'm a freelance graphic designer and I specialize in data visualization and I work between Milan and Amsterdam, mostly with the university and research lab.
Daniele Ciminieri.
Hi, I'm Daniele, I'm part of the Density Design Lab. I have a technical background, as I studied as a computer science engineer, so I focus on data visualization pretty much every fields.
Yeah. So Density Design is not only made by designers, pure designers, so we have also other people that have a different background, but we try to live together. Gabriele Colombo.
Hello, I'm a PhD student in Density Design also. This is my first time working with data from the humanities.
Yeah, don't worry. Giovanni Moretti.
Hello, I am Giovanni. I'm coming from Trento. I work at Fondazione Kessler in the Digital Humanity School. I am a software developer. The man writes the code. The man writes the code and the other strange things. I hope to have with my skills.
You will. And well, you can mention, I know that you're a shy guy, but you can mention the award that you won recently.
Sorry?
The award, the prize.
Yeah, we won DH Awards in the category DH for Fun. Yeah, DH for Fun. DH of game based on the perception of arts and so on. And we have we reached the third position in the digital humanity schools with our platform, Archie.
So they are part of this digital humanities research program. So they are very active. It's not a big group. Very active. And I find
4 or 5 people.
4 or 5 people. And I found really interesting this prize they got because I think it's a good direction. So trying to apply gamification, what is called gamification, and new kind of ways of interacting with data. So even if not fun, playing with data could be action.
Yeah, our expertise are NLP, natural language processing, content extraction. We try to.
Okay, thank you. Glauco, Mastigari.
Hello, I'm Glauco. I'm one of these hybrid creatures. My background is in the humanities and classics, and I have PhD in computer science. And now I'm based in Curtin, based in Milan, work in between data science and design, let's say, information visualization. And so my main connection with this project is because I was at Stanford, where I met also Paolo, and I started working with Paolo as well on the Republic of Letters with Dan Ederstein, and I was working on specifically on data and information of different sources.
Yeah. Marco Poggiotto.
Hello everybody, I'm Marco Poggiotto. I got my PhD in the visualization of knowledge structures almost 10 years ago. Now I work together, I at the Politecnico di Milano, now I work together with data scientists. I lead a collaboration laboratory between Politecnico di Milano, ISI Foundation in Turin and the University of Turin, where we join the competence of data science with design and computer science to work on the visualization of data, mostly related to the hard sciences, so physics and network science. But I try also to keep my interest in the humanities going on visualization of knowledge structures.
Yeah. Michele Vernizzi.
Hi everybody, I'm Michele. I'm a Master of Science student and I'm part of the Density Design Research Lab. And this is also my first time working with digital humanities.
Yeah, and Michele is also part of a new experiment we are running, let's say with Harvard. It's with computer science, so it's not at all related to humanities, but I think it's a kind of a new format we're trying to develop to give students very strict challenges. So they have to start with the data and go towards the business model of the application. And I think it's quite an interesting experiment, teaching-wise. Michele Mauri, it's me.
Hello, I'm Michele, and I'm part of the Density Design Group. And I got my PhD in design, working with density design, and that's all.
What was the topic? What is your topic?
Well, The topic of the PhD was the visualization of born digital data, and so in some ways it's related now to digital humanities. So we focus more on the visualization of data coming from the web, unstructured data, to understand social issues.
Yeah, I have to say, Michele was the person that in a way led, I would say, the participation of density design to the European project, the EMAPS, European project we had for 3 years, funded by the European Union with Sciences Po in Paris. It was all about cartography of controversies, and all our participation has been, in a way, driven by Michele. So he's not maybe in digital humanities as we normally think to that, but I think this work he has done for 3 years, 4 years, also with the University of Amsterdam, in the field of sociology of science, I think could be very precious. Tommaso Elli, that you may have read some emails.
I was the one who was stressing you.
Big stalker.
Okay, I'm part of the lab as well. I took part in January, so quite fresh. And I've done my master thesis on digital humanities in collaboration with Giovanni and his team from Trento. And well, I hope to get better knowledge of the field of this workshop.
Yeah, we hired, let's say, Tommaso specifically for,
sending emails.
Not only, that was part of the core, please. But we hired him especially for, try to strengthen our presence in the field of digital humanities. So he's following up, replacing in a way Giorgio Boldi, that was the person in charge before. He decided to change his life in terms of how to work in the field of data visualization. But so I think Tommaso is a good way to continue this investment we are trying to do in this area, because I think we really see a lot of potentialities in this collaboration. And finally, after the group of designers, there is a third category of people, the supervisors. Howard Watson, you are one of the supervisors.
Okay, yes.
You were not aware of this.
I'm Harold Watson. I'm an early modern intellectual historian, working on Central Europe in particular in the 17th century. Intellectual geography is a term I've been banding around for quite a while without fully sort of theorizing, but it's where quite a few of my interests converge. I also direct the Cultures of Knowledge project in Oxford, which is responsible for early modern letters online, and chair the COST network, which is brought us here together.
Charles
Charles van den Heuvel.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a very difficult name to pronounce.
It's like two kind of.
It's not even my parents had a problem for naming my first name, so they did it in two different ways. So I used to not know how to pronounce my name actually. So who was right? But anyway, my background is in art history, but I'm in the science. Became an historian of cartography and later more and more the history of science. I'm leading the Department of History of Science at the Huygens Institute for the History of the Netherlands, 4 days a week. And 1 day in the week, I'm teaching at the University of Amsterdam, digital methods and historical disciplines. And I make part of the COST Action, leading the work group 3, text and topics.
Good.
Oh, and we developed, perhaps because you mentioned your project, the Circulation of Knowledge project in the Netherlands, the Epistolarium, which I will be talking about also later during the day.
That's me, but I will not speak about myself, and not that much. After I will add some information about me. Stefan Matuch.
Hello, my name is Stefan Matuch. I'm a professor of computer science in Bucharest Polytechnic University, I'm teaching and doing research in natural language processing, and more specifically in that discourse analysis. We developed a model, a recurring model of analyzing discourse in documents and in intertextuality. And we have developed several systems, and tomorrow I will present an environment for analyzing corpora of text. And I'm also, of course, in the cost section in VP3 and.
Okay, so what is the difference between these three categories of people? So the first two categories, so the humanist researchers and the designers and technology researchers, they will form the groups. So we will work in groups, you know, and the groups will be made of people belonging to these two categories. The third category of supervisors is people that represent, in a way, the same, let's say, mix of disciplines, so design, technology, and humanities, but have this kind of role to floating around the groups and try to, you know, make connections, I would say. So that's the intended model. So groups with all the disciplines and a kind of a netted group of supervisors that try to see if there are any connection between the working groups that will work on data brought by the humanist researchers. The agenda for this first day.
Just one question, Mr. Thomas.
I'm the person who just walked down here.
Good to know who
by chance.
I'm nothing against him, but there is a reason why I didn't mention him.
He's very generous.
No. I mean, you can say why. So.
Because actually I'm here, my name is Thomas Weilig, I'm from the University of Vienna, I'm co-chair of the Action, and I'm only here today and on Friday and giving a brief talk and not really part of that very well orchestrated setup that Paulo just introduced. So you will hear me talk for some 15-20 minutes later, but I think this is everything.
I'm sorry, nothing personal. No, it was because, in fact, he has a kind of a different role, so I'm really happy he managed on his own to come and to join us and to talk us, but it's not formally officially part of the workshop. That's really long reason. I didn't mention you, but he's also the co-chair of the Action, so perfect. Going through the agenda, we are in the introduction phase now. We are 10 minutes late. We will have a speech by our Watson and Thomas Wallinger talking about the historiographical agenda. We have, in a way, always in our mind in this action. Then it's me and Tommaso giving a bit of context for the workshop. You know, it's a kind of a moving towards the practical activities. Then lunch break, another lecture or talk in the afternoon by Charles, and then we have these two specific formats that I will briefly describe. Lightning talks are made by the humanist researchers that didn't bring data, but I think we thought it's useful to share knowledge about what they're doing. So we had to select the data and to find just one topic per group for practical reasons. There were more, of course, interesting topics, but we couldn't manage to have, you know, for an equal number of groups working on this interesting topic. So the idea is to have really quick talks that just, you know, give the idea of the topic, and maybe then you will have a chance to discuss about that later. So the humanist researchers that don't bring data to the group, they are in charge for these lightning talks. The project pitches are by the humanist researchers that bring data. So they have to very briefly explain what the data is and what is especially the research question they bring together with the data. That's very important, of course, because it's, you know, it's the starting point for the working group, and also because after we know the project, the research questions by the different humanist researchers, we will form the groups with the designers. because we know already the couple of humanities researchers that we work together, but we don't know yet which are the designers and the technologists that will join these groups, because we want, and I think this is based by our experience, we want to really create the right group. So we will sacrifice our coffee, tea break, the designers, in order to meet and form the groups. Appreciate that. Then 4 o'clock-ish, more or less, we will start working with groups. I'm sure we will be able in 15, 20, 30 minutes maximum to really come up with a final solution for the group. We have a pre-conceived idea, but let's see. I think it will not be a problem. Work session. So there is let's say an hour, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half to start building the group. So based on the research question, based on the data, we will start discussing the plan for the week. And what we ask every day, and again, this is by experience, something that really helps in keeping the pace and advancing in the work. You are in charge for producing a presentation of the status of the art of your work. It doesn't mean that you have to, surprise us with a beautiful presentation or keynote or PowerPoint, whatever. But you have to formalize the status of the art, the progress of your work, every day at the end of the day. If not, we will not open the doors. So, but really, it's very important. You could you could do that by pencil and a paper and just take a picture and show that. So it doesn't mean it has to be done. It could be very, very rough, but it's just to state we are here. Okay, could be completely changed the day after. Doesn't matter. You can restart in the morning after with a totally different idea. But we want to know every day, at the end of the day, where you are. Okay, it's very important to keep the pace and to guarantee something at the end, the result. We'll not spend more words now. We'll go back to the actual goal of the workshop after. Before leaving the floor to Howard, just a few technical, if you want to tweet during the workshop, that's why we have internet. If you don't have internet access here, we have the Wi-Fi access information. These are some keywords or hashtags I suggest, but you can invent your own. And these are the 2 accounts we have for density design and for technical design. And we are streaming the workshop. There was a request on that direction for someone that could not participate. But if you want to share with, I don't know, your family, your parents, the activity here to prove that there was a serious reason to come to Como, then that's the link. For the video streaming, only the people that have the link, can see us. So if you don't share, it's not public, let's say. So that's why we didn't ask for permission. So only people with the link can see us working. Howard.
Actually, given the fact that you are not here, that we could have extra slides. Very good. Okay, I thought, given that there are so many people here who are new to the cost action, and given the importance of everybody being more or less on the same page, that I'd start with a few slides which will be also familiar to those of us who've participated in cost over the last year or two, but just to make certain that everybody understands in very broad terms where we're coming from. I'll then have a very, very few words to say about the importance of visualization in this whole activity, show you a couple of examples without any pretense to be saying anything particularly interesting or innovative. So first of all, just an introduction to the cost action, where the project as a whole is going, of which this workshop is just one part. Basically, we're studying the Republic of Letters as a phenomenon created by the development of postal networks of the early modern period, which in English historical lexicon means roughly 1500 to 1800, the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, when the evolution of postal communications allowed ordinary men and women, learned men and women, to scatter letters across and beyond Europe. And this is one of the dimensions of a kind of ongoing communication revolution. It's knit together what contemporaries call the Res Publica Literaria, the Republic of Letters, a knowledge-based civil society crucial to that era's intellectual breakthrough. So if you talk about the Renaissance, if you talk about the Reformation, if you talk about the scientific revolution, if you talk about the Enlightenment, you're talking about an acceleration, an intensification of intellectual life within and between European countries, which is created at least in part by enhanced modes of communication, of which the evolution of postal communications is one very important aspect. Now, the problem is, of course, that the exchange of letters, which creates this community, which we desperately want to know more about, also disperses the documentation required to study it. A letter serves its function by being transported from one place to another, and if you're in contact with 100 different people in 100 different places, then at the end of your life, your letters have been scattered through potentially dozens and dozens of different archives, if indeed they survive. So the very mode of communication which gives definition to the Republic of Letters is also posing enormous difficulties for scholars ever since, trying to piece back together this correspondence which has been scattered all over the place. Hence the need to reassemble that material and to chart the history of that imagined community, the need to harness the ongoing revolution in digital communications to provide us with a whole new set of technologies for reassembling that material, but also making sense of it. So much of the action is about trying to devise not only technological solutions, but also scholarly working practices and legal arrangements, which will allow the whole pan-European community of libraries, archives, IT systems developers, scholars from many different fields to collaborate in piecing back together the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of bits of discrete data, millions of fragmentary pieces of documentation necessary for us to understand how this vitally important pan-European intellectual community actually functions. We've seen projects proliferating rapidly in the last few years as scholars have independently come to realize how beneficial this ongoing communications revolution is for helping us to understand the earlier communications revolution. And for this purpose, we need you see a kind of a rogues gallery of some of the major figures of, particularly in this case, the 17th century, the sort of people that we're attempting to reassemble. We've been working on this in Oxford in a variety of different ways. So in this respect, as in many others, the cost action simply layered on top of a series of independent projects which have been going on and trying to bring together participants to discuss the basic technology and arrangements necessary in order to collaborate in a radically multilateral way and on a pan-European basis. Cost means cooperation in science and technology. It's not the sort of thing which humanist scholars tend to have much access to, but not least because there's a technological dimension to what we're doing. We beat the 50 to 1 odds to get a constant action in the humanities. We have 31 countries from across Europe represented in the action. So this is simply by way of a very general background information on the large project of which this workshop is a part. Let me just illustrate very briefly for you the kind of problems that we're dealing with, because of course the difficulty is when you bring together unprecedented quantities of data, whether this is catalog metadata, describing the exchange of correspondence between individuals, or this is biographical and prosopographical data on the correspondence, the people who are actually exchanging the letters, or whether you're talking about the textual data itself that's being exchanged between them. And it's important to remember here that letters are very fragmentary. They hop very quickly from one topic to another. The more data you bring together, the more desperately you are in need of tools which will allow you to survey, to analyze, to understand the general shape of that data. So the project of trying to devise new means of bringing together unprecedented quantities of data brings with it necessarily the challenge of trying to find new ways of visualizing that data in order to help scholars understand the structure of the material that they're dealing with. So visualization has been a very important part of the agenda of this action in the beginning. But for most of us, it remains a fairly vague aspiration. We all know that we need it. We're not quite certain what it is that we need. We're not quite certain how to go about defining our needs more carefully and working through all the options available. And we're also aware, of course, that there are many other disciplines which have been dealing with data on a much larger scale than we have been doing in the humanities. Humanities tends to be kind of logocentric. We like to analyze things discursively. We're not even very familiar with mathematical tools for analyzing, much less visualization tools. So we're very conscious of having a lot to learn from designers, from visualization experts, and from other disciplines who've been confronting similar sorts of problems for a very long time. We have to overcome a degree of resistance within the established humanistic community, partly because the kind of visualizations which are readily reproduced by standard tools tend to be rather two-dimensional, can be somewhat superficial, can seem misleading. We need help in devising, we therefore need help in devising new visual languages to represent our data visually in a more adequate fashion. And I think above all, we need tools which allow us to generate multiple visualizations of the same data set, not for presentation purposes, but for purposes of understanding the structure of our data. And ultimately, I think we need these tools built into the kind of pan-European digital infrastructure which we are aspiring to create, so that even expert users expert in humanistic disciplines, in scholarly techniques, but not experts in IT or in visualization, can very naturally acquire capacity to analyze their and understand their data visually. So this is really the objective. We're ultimately trying to do several different things. Work out visual languages for analyzing our data, and also user-friendly techniques which we can then expose to all scholars in the field, from the basis of a shared digital platform. To give you a slightly clearer sense of the kind of data we're talking about here, here are a series of hard copy attempts to visualize one of the representative correspondences of the 17th and early 18th century. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, extraordinarily fertile mind, and also an extraordinary avid correspondent, leaving behind something like 15,000 letters. And here you have, sort of typical static visualization based on the supposition that all of these 15,000 letters were sent to or from Hanover, which is where he spent the bulk of his mature life. But in fact, if you look at this other visualization of his travels, he is actually quite mobile. He's not mobile, he's not one of the most mobile members of the Republic of Letters by any means, but he's constantly moving back between Hanover and Wolfenbüttel, between Hanover, Wolfenbüttel, and Berlin. He moves down to Vienna and down into Italy. Later in his life, he moves via Paris, London, and Amsterdam on a grand tour later in his life. So, of course, we have to understand that he's both sending and receiving letters as he's moving around in time and space as well. His correspondence are also interlinked in all kinds of other ways, aside from the fact that they all happen to be in receipt of letters from Leibniz. Here's one kind of relationship, the genealogical relationships between some of the princes, princesses, kings and queens, emperors with whom Leibniz corresponded, just as a gesture in the direction of suggesting that, of course, the correspondence, the Republic of Letters is knit together in all kinds of other ways aside from exchange of correspondence, including, in this case, fundamentally important genealogical relationships. Now, so we're dealing with several different data with several different dimensions. There's a geographical dimension because letters are sent from one place to another and they record their places of sending and receipt. There's a chronological dimension. Typically, letters conclude with a date of sending. Sometimes we also know the date of receipt, which allows us to give some sense of how correspondence networks evolve over time. There's a social dimension, if you want to use this term, who's writing to whom. There's a biographical dimension about pre-existing relationships and the ways in which this intellectual community is structured above and beyond the exchange of correspondence. And then, of course, there's the infinitely complex topical dimension, what's being discussed, who's being discussed, what places are being discussed, what things, what concepts, what ideas are being discussed. So we have at least 5 different dimensions of this data. And of course, we can imagine combining these dimensions in a variety of different ways as well. And here is one desperate attempt to do so in the case of Leibniz, trying to understand something of the topical as well as geographical and social dimension of Leibniz's network. Let's see if I can remember exactly how this works. Okay, here you have a map of Leibniz's correspondence arranged by city, that is the main city from which they corresponded. Underneath the city, you have a list of names. Next to the list of names, you have a list of numbers. The numbers correspond to this list of topics over here, which runs from philosophy to, I believe it's geography at the bottom, numismatics, politics, mathematics. Leibniz is, of course, Universalgelehrter. He's an extraordinarily wide-ranging mind, so you have an encyclopedic list of topics here with some attempt to try to understand what topics he's discussing with what people in what places. But you can see the desperate nature of this effort, because of course these correspondents are also moving around in space. They're corresponding with him on multiple different topics, just as he's corresponding with them on multiple different topics. This is this is a demonstration really of why we need to move beyond static images and print technology and harness the capacity of digital technology to provide us with much more sophisticated and multidimensional tools for analyzing and visualizing what we're doing. And while thinking about this, in my own rather desperate attempt to provide visual aid for our discussions, I put together this little table really just as a prompt for people to begin thinking about the potential complexity of what we're doing here. Here you have the geographical, chronological, biographical, social, and topical dimensions of our data, and some attempt to think about the combinations and permutations of those. I mean, obviously, for instance, if you're talking about mapping your data geographically, you also want to see how that develops over time. If you're talking about biographical data, you're tracking the location histories, the contact histories of people as they move around in space, as they move across time, and possibly also, what they're talking about. So this is just the combinations of two of these 5 dimensions of our data. You could also look at combinations of 3 or 4 or 5 combinations, and this is where we are most desperately in need of assistance from IT systems developers and designers to begin to help us come up with the tools, but also the visual language for being able to represent multiple correspondence networks, multiple individuals, possibly multiple different geographical strata of our data, the political, the confessional, the economic, the intellectual, within the language that we can make our own, because it represents our data effectively and allows us to discuss it and to analyze it more thoroughly. So all this by way of trying to articulate why we're here, why we're so grateful for Paolo for bringing together so many designers to work in close proximity with this established scholarly community, why visualization in some respects represents the culmination of what we're doing. It's once we have this data and once we've worked out how to structure it, that we need these tools for understanding it. We need to do that in as natural, as user-friendly a way as we possibly can, in order for these techniques and this approach to bed down across a range of humanistic disciplines and become second nature for scholars the way it is in many other disciplines. So all this really by way of introduction. Let me just close then by reiterating our thanks to Paolo and all of his colleagues here for hosting this. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. I've felt in acute need of exactly this kind of extended introduction into this whole world, and I personally am looking forward very much to what we're going to learn over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of days. Thank you very much.
So if it's a good idea to have Italians deal with aesthetics, perhaps it's a good idea to have an Austria deal with bureaucracy. Before I start, kind of taking what Howard just outlined on a very schematic and timeline-like level, let me ask perhaps Tommaso, who, as I understand, is also responsible of the administrative issues of this workshop. If we all, is he not?
Officially, it's me.
Okay. So that we will have a register, so a list of names provided by Post Office, which has to be signed each and every day by each and every participant. So you get reimbursed. So it's in your own interest to do that. Except for a few exceptions who know they don't have to sign. Equally, let me say that it would be good to process your travel request reimbursements, travel reimbursement requests, sorry, after the workshop as soon as possible. So you all have this printed form. Please send that back to the Brockner in Oxford as soon as possible. We're at the end of second grant period, which was shortened without our consent, and we have to kind of get those administrative issues off the table as soon as possible. That having been said, I would like to also give you a brief introduction to what COST is in terms of grant scheme, in terms of internal structure. COST, as Howard said, stands for Cooperation in Science and Technology, and is a 4-year networking program of the European Union, which means that it brings together people from 31 countries. It doesn't fund their research, it just funds their travel. And some additional tools like short-term scientific missions, training schools, that make sure the overall agenda of the action is being addressed. So what is the overall agenda? And I'm saying this also in order to invite you to look that up if you want to have more of that framework, context, background. Everything can be found on our website. We have the so-called Memorandum of Understanding, which is the proposal which is being transformed in the moment in which your action is being approved into a kind of legal work plan for that action. And every country that signs up to the action through that agrees to follow this agenda and time schedule. We're in the middle, more or less. So we started in spring 2014. We're now heading towards the second grant period with 2 more grant periods to come. And we are also heading towards our second large conference. The first large conference was held in Oxford in March 2015. And it's important to understand the sequence of these meetings to properly frame this workshop and where we stand generally. So, whereas in Oxford, we were trying to look at the scholarly question of the Republic of Letters from a digital point of view. So to see all kinds of projects, many of which Howard just showed, with very advanced digital functionalities, addressing questions of, say, early modern intellectual history. We're now flipping the agenda. So what will be the core topic of our upcoming conference in Warsaw in June will be looking at digital technologies and functionalities from a scholarly point of view. And my talk here in the coming 15-20 minutes is about that. It's what we have in mind by saying we look at digital functionalities from the point of view of humanities scholars. Before I go into detail, I also want to kind of give a concrete spin to what Howard outlined in terms of different approaches: space and time, people and networks, texts and topics, documents and collections, strategic, outlook, and visualization are the 6 working groups. The 6 working groups of the action are important to bear in mind because on an administrative level, they give us various opportunities to kind of streamline and focus discussions. But at the same time, they provide a kind of internal, if you want, chapter structure to what we're doing. We're fully aware that all those things are interrelated, so that when you're talking about biographies, you're at the same time often talking about intellectual geographies, and while you're talking about the various manifestations of a letter, you're at the same time talking about visualization. However, these working group structures and agendas, and I'm really inviting you, encouraging you to look them up on the website, provide kind of a basic framework for how we kind of make sure that we're not talking about the same thing in 5 different settings at the same time. I think this is one of the major challenges we're facing here, and this is something we all should keep in mind. So this is working group 6, visualization and communication. I think this was a very important remark that Paulo made 1.5 years ago. This is not just visualization, this is communication of data. So many of the other topics that I'm going to talk about, space, prosopography, are of course also subject to this working group. However, please consider it within the scope and within the agenda of working group 6. This having been said, flipping the agenda also meant trying to have a sequence of meetings during the past year that tried to narrow down what this looking at tech from a scholarly point of view could mean. We had a meeting in Vienna whose minutes are also up on the website, where first we tried, so we basically, Howard and myself, and then with a group of some people from the individual working groups, tried to break down into more specific historiographical questions what those individual working groups meant or could mean. I would like to stress one thing. We're talking about humanist scholars. At the same time, we have to be aware that, of course, as emerged from the presentation of the DH community here, there are various nuances, and this is not just one group that's coherent. And why I'm saying this, there are people who, if you will, produce data, who make catalogs of learned letters, who edit letters, who publish them, but there are also people now, as there have been in the past, who link those data to some kind of methodological reflection. And this is a kind of balance we should be trying to keep in mind and trying to focus on. So this is not just about data, this is also about the already existing methodological reflections of what those data can actually tell us and what not. I will be a bit more specific. This is just to say that for space and time, we kind of said we could be focusing, it was just a suggestion in order to get those balls rolling within individual working groups. We could be focusing on individual people, on communities, on scholars in exile. on people on the ground tour, on things other than things, not people travel. So we have a project here that addresses the spatial distribution of Newton's Principia. So this book, you have all kinds of things, maps being sent along with letters. So let's not just think about people. In people and networks, you can think of, if you will, private, spontaneous contact that people go into, but also the institutional settings people belong to. So if you have a religious order, people will communicate also, that's called letters, but within a predefined circuit. Whereas the Republic of Letters, as we used to understand it, is more of a spontaneous exchange that's not being determined, should not have been determined by political power or personal interest. Of course, it's not the case. But this just to make you think that you can think of individuals, but also institutional settings, universities, academy, courts, texts and topics, some random questions we were suggesting then. What's the use of the term Republic of Letters throughout this period in the letters? So where is it used? How often is it used together with what other terms is it being used? Something that I know that with my private Benedictine sample is that when the term Republic of Letters comes up in Benedictine letters, it usually comes up together with and for the glory of the order, or for the glory of Germany. So you can look at those things from the textual side. You can look at, and we're going to do this in Vienna in a couple of weeks, is there any possibility to quantify traits of learned Latin? So is there any possibility to say a Central European wrote another learned Latin than somebody from the Netherlands? This just to give an idea where we started some 3-4 months ago, and we asked historiographical coordinators within each working group to kind of see, to work that out and work specifically with people they appointed to elaborate on specific issues in that regard, with view to the Warsaw Conference. And this is why I'm telling you all this. In Warsaw, we're going to have 3 days of conference with half-day slots dedicated to each individual working group. And the working group 6 slot will be organized by Paolo. The working group 3 slot will be organized by Charles. Working group 2 slot by Howard and myself. So all of what's going to happen in the coming week should also happen with a view to the Warsaw Conference. The selection, of course, is up to the mentioned people. I deliberately take out working group 4 and 5, which are cases apart or just already very consolidated, perhaps with Franz de Ricardo is representing working group 4. Should anyone have the feeling to want to get in touch with the representatives of working group 1, so the space and time working group, perhaps let us know, and we'll see to arrange a kind of exchange here. At the same time, I would appreciate very much, let me say that, following up to Paolo's very good suggestion to kind of wrap up a day's work into presentations. It would be very good if at the end of the workshop we could have a 3-pager or 2-pager as a kind of write-up for the rest of the action. As I said earlier, it's very important that everybody is kept up to date. So perhaps you within the organizer group could find a way to provide that sometime soon. So, what does it mean in detail to look at tech from the scholarly side? One, as I said, it's not just about positivism, it's not just about data, it's also, this is about integrating the broader scholarly community, thinking about the theoretical and methodological work that has been done during the past 10, 20, 30 years. I'll give you some examples. Two, Howard was briefly talking about a digital infrastructure we're trying to establish. And when you think of such a digital infrastructure with all kind of functionalities plugged in, you see it as a thing that's both a repository and a kind of union catalog full of letters, but at the same time also a research tool. So think of that double nature of any kind of larger infrastructure that we're going to create. So that it's not just I want to look up who Leibniz wrote to, but that this also, if we frame it the right way, gives us the possibility to search unprecedented quantities of data according to our specific questions. And sure, there is a core set of very easily manageable data, sender, recipient, date, place. And then there are very difficult and not easily manageable criteria like topics, or something that could be astronomy for me is natural philosophy for somebody else. So, but there is a range in between. And I think it's important to think about that range in between, how much consensus we can gain in order to model our data according to that. Three, when we talk about historiographical agenda, this is a help term. This, of course, also means philologies, philosophy, theology. So when I'm talking about methodologies and their recent prehistories, I'm deliberately not only talking about history, but about all that larger range of disciplines that deal with the Republic of Letters, if you will. Social history, history of courts, history of diplomacy, history of the book, you name it. I mean, I'm aware that scholars in the room will be hopefully agreeing, but familiar with that. But I'm really trying to say this in order to tell to people who perhaps have not been working with humanists so far, so they don't like, but they have their specific background. I think it's somewhat important to stress that out. And another thing is that I know that thinking about visualizations, thinking about data modeling, the same questions do not always work equally well on all data samples. I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. That, for example, scholars in exile, with really people moving, gives you get a good grip by thinking geographically, which is not entirely the case if you have basically two scholars who do not move. I mean, will not stay in Königsberg all his life, will give you a different result. So perhaps it's important to say that one question is valid for this test case, but less valid for another. So this brings me to 4 very brief just thoughts based on previous studies or things that I've come across recently. Addressing working group agendas 1, 2, 3, and 6. As I said, I'm kind of leaving apart 4 and 5. And I'm just saying this is a kind of suggestion, a mindset that I want to kind of give to you and see if you can make something out of this. If you think of place, and for time it's the same, you might want to distinguish between a geographical dimension, between an institutional dimension, and between a literary dimension. We all know that it's difficult to map historical facts onto today's maps because, I mean, it's just not the same political landscape as in the 18th or 17th century. And we're still quite far from being able to press a button and have a Holy Roman Empire with all its states ready there for our map. At the same time, if I'm talking about, say, Augsburg, I'm talking about a confessionally mixed city. I'm talking about a Catholic bishopric. I'm talking about the place where the Academia Leopoldina was staying at some time. So it's important to distinguish between a geographical kind of mapping and an institutional kind of mapping, and a literary kind of mapping. And here I draw some inspiration from the work Pelagius is doing, and Elton Barker and Leif Isaacson in particular, from an ancient history context. They were working with Herodotus, and Herodotus, at a certain point, they were trying to map Herodotus' world. So ancient Greek historiography geographer. He's saying Scythia is in the north. How do you map that? And there are 2 rivers. So from there, they thought about ways of really saying this is a literary figure, this is Scythia, and this is where you find it in Herodotus, but it's not necessarily a place on a map. So I think this is important to bear in mind also, and this is why I might want to add in each of these sections a GG, a CC, a BB, if you will, to that line. You can think of, for example, how do people perceive space and time in their letters? Oh, it's such a long time you didn't write to me. So in measurable terms, these are 3 weeks. But they're so literary. So this is just one way I wanted to say you might be wanting to think about space and time in those 3 and perhaps more layers. People and networks, working group 2. I think it's something that's fundamental to understand that what we know about the lives of those people comes from historical sources that were created with a specific intention and in a specific administrative setting. Meaning that it's life and birth records, for example, or marriage records, or life accounts. We have to be extremely careful. The biographical dictionaries that we have today, from the ODNB to the Allgemeine Deutsche Biographie, are basically 19th, 20th century write-ups of eulogies and, if you will, laudatory speeches about those people coming in the 18th century. So you will have a specific mode of speaking underlying that biography. It will be highlighting certain things, highlighting certain events, the national glory aspect, or in fact, so the biographical texts that we usually work with are highly biased. And I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to know, and it's a good thing to work with, in the sense that, and here the book in my mind is Lisa Jardin's Erasmus. The Republic of Letters, to a large extent, is scholars writing themselves as scholars. So if we take their letters, and this was what Jardine showed with Erasmus. Basically, he wanted us to know he was that way. When you confront that with other behaviors, he was all over. Yeah? So you really have to think of those data as proceeding from specific biased contexts, and not to be just taken for granted, but to be subject to the same source criticism that we used to work with in the analogous world. Texts and topics. Obviously, I think one of the most challenging things here is to see to what degree you will manage to get a historical dimension into the extraction of keywords from large corpora. What do I mean? The book that I'm having in mind again is just out now. It's Scripting Revolution by Dan Adelstein and Keith Baker. And they've been looking into how the term revolution made the French Revolution. So as you may imagine, there's an interaction between the use of words and framing of events. And revolution in 1760, 17 meant something perhaps not different, but semantically far less universal than it would have meant in 1795. So this is about the historicity of terms, the fact that things not only change meaning over time, but that very change of meaning is something we should grapple with and try to be able to model. Finally, as an idea for working group 6, there's this incredibly important book by Laurie Daston and Peter Gallison called Objectivity, and it's about visualizing plants in 18th century, 19th century scholarship. So what they say is that there is a switch from making an ideal plant with all the traits that are distinctive from another plant. So the ideal palm or the ideal strawberry to the exact strawberry that you have in front of you. Also, if it doesn't show all the traits you want. And through that, and a lot of other considerations, they come to the fact that objectivity, say, I'm not just making up my plant because I want to show to my reader that this is the species I'm talking about, but to say this is objectively the plant that I have in front of me is not without alternatives, and is a historical phenomenon itself. So what I'm thinking about here is that through this kind of contextualization and historicization of visualization in the scholarly world, we understand that, first of all, so it seems to me, and so it seems to me also in that recent literature, we're following a science model. So we're following an epistemological pre-assumption that we have inherited from the sciences, meaning that if you see something, that's true. And this, however, can help us think of those epistemological thing that's also fluid in time and an object of reflection for ourselves. Okay, that was more than 20 minutes. I think what I would like to formulate as takeaway points. On a pragmatic level, we said that we would, there would be that kind of selection process for the Warsaw Conference. However, if you feel you work together well, please also consider transforming your work into publications in what format ever. This is something we may need for our cost reporting, and which can be beneficial also for the others in the action, or to keep up with the progress here. The second thing, just reaffirming, please consider sources, data, and theory and methodology. I mean, I was just bringing up a couple of ideas. I could have said something about Stephen Chapin and social history of truth, many things. So let's just not ignore that. I think this is one of the fundamental points if we want to really get a coherent dialogue with the scholarly communities and have fun.
Okay, so Thomas saved 7 minutes. We can either decide to use these minutes to have a coffee that we didn't have this morning, or to try to have lunch a bit early. What do you prefer?
I'd like to give the opportunity to the non-humanist scholars in the audience to ask the most basic questions, because I imagine that quite a lot of what we had to say included all kinds of assumptions about what it is about what we're doing that may not be correct. So I don't know whether people might like to ask questions now, or if not, ask questions of the humanist half of the gathering over coffee or over lunch. Because if there are fundamental questions which they need to be answered before we can start laying out the things on.
You're right. So, non-humanists. Non-humanists. Do you have any questions? Well, some of you say that that's the first time I can meet and I work with people from humanities. So.
That's a question. I mean, I understand the concept that we have to consider if our data is based, biased or not. But once we talk about visualization, we're just working with data. I mean, isn't it a step before? Like once you decide which data you have, and then you create your database, and then you have your visualization. I mean, literally as a step before, you gather all your books, your data, you decide which is biased, which not, how to consider which places, if you consider an institution, if you consider a geographical place. But then once we are here, like once we program, it doesn't really matter for us. I mean, maybe I'm very mathematician, maybe
Can I answer it? I mean, you can visualize that as well, the whole uncertainty. So that could be, for instance, that you can clean up first your data and then present it. But you can also say, okay, we just do not know. We have here conflicting views. The project mathematic controversies, for instance. You can have different approaches also in visualization to express that you're not sure yet. So that's more, I think, that the multidimensionality where Howard was referring to also has implications for the representations thereof. So just not to think in networks in a very two-dimensional way, but think in other broad ways when you're dealing with that. Because we can always reduce the data that you can handle it, but then you lose a lot of dimensions, which are very important, actually, for the humanities side of this project. So that's more to try to be open in all those, try to grasp those dimensions and that uncertainty. That would be my answer to it.
I completely agree with Charles, and I try to say that in a different way. So we are not here to code, and we are not here to just visualize the data. Okay? Did you know that? We are here to make sense of this data together. So that's my perspective, and that's the only way to make design, communication design, useful as a discipline. So you have data, but this data is representation of something else. And that's what you are bringing here. I mean, that's something I will talk about later. We are here to make sense of that in a certain way. And it's more than coding is, and it could be biased on the same way data. And that's a decision. So it's let's say a design decision. How to translate, how to transform. It's another transformation of this data in order to make sense of it on a certain perspective.
And I'm very mathematician. X is everything, it could be sheaves.
So you develop dimensions as well as a mathematician.
Coding is part of it, visualization is part of it, but it's not all. There's something more that is exactly, I think, what Charles was saying. Does anybody want to add something on this? I think it's a fundamental point. So do you agree, or what is your feeling?
I think it's a fantastic point. I mean, one way that I think humanists cherish our ambiguity, and we cherish our problems, and we cherish our debates. And the moment that we sort of move into a presentation that gets rid of that ambiguity in debates is really anxiety producing for us. So one of the things that I think many of us appreciate is finding a way to use design to kind of translate those questions and ambiguities into a new meaning.
Yeah, that's very important.
If I may add, I think what we especially cherish is this other point of view of our agents in history. So this is why, if we take a map and geo-rectify it, so let's say adapt it to our own, we would also want to have a visualization of the same map, whatever we do with it, but going back to the original errors, that we see in it, and this is like, in a way, also there's not such a dichotomy between the data and what we call the capta, the thing that we create in order to get back to the point of view of our agents, because if you think about networks of relationships, it's exactly this attempt to see the importance of people as it was then, rather than as we consider them today. So through past sources.
Well, that's something that comes to my mind, but I'm not sure it's well formulated. But to me, it's like the visualization, let's say, will come up is a new content that is co-authored by the designer and the human. So it's a kind of a new thing that has two authors. Yeah. Because there are so many decisions that can lead you. There's no algorithm. I mean, you don't know that before. But it's something that's co-created. Or better, this is a way to do that. And it's the way we strongly support. Maybe it's not your way, but in our case, we saw that that's really where you exploit fully the potentialities of putting these two disciplines together.
Maybe one helpful way for mathematicians to think about it in terms of patterns. So you look for a pattern, and then you can identify the central point, averages, outliers, all those kind of things. So pattern, I think, is.
I wouldn't not necessarily say pattern, because that can still be very flat pattern. I would say non-Euclidean geometry. That gives far more space of opportunity.
So we have 1 hour presentation now, and so we changed the coffee for the questions. And, we go through this other presentation. I think this is right on the right moment, because I will try to share with you the idea I have about the workshop and why it makes sense to work together in these 5 days. And Tommaso will share with you some projects we have done, something about our work in the field. Okay. That's I will try to be very quick, but I think it is important. I produce a picture of my research lab. I say I would add some words. Most of these people, you will know most of these people in these days. Well, that's me on top. Michele and Azzurra will be here with the groups. Angeles as well, Gabriele. There is a laser here, pointer. No, Tommaso. No, okay. Then also Tommaso and Daniele. So the full lab, more or less, will be engaged in this workshop, and we are, I would say, still taking profit from some work that has been done by former members of the lab. Here you can see Dr. Boldi, that was part of the cross-section, and Dr. Caviglia, that is a kind of fundamental link between us and the digital humanities. He spent more or less 2 years at Stanford Humanities Center, really creating the bridge between design and digital humanities. He also the author of many tools, including Palladio, that you probably know. And so it's a kind of a, it's a very strong link. So we are still on the shoulders of some of these former members of the lab. So, but we are not only working on digital humanities, and I think this could be, I hope, a plus. So digital humanities is one of the research lines we have in the research lab. We also work with cities as databases. We work with business processes, with presentations. We work with visual analytics. We work with other fields of, but I think this gives us the right perspective to understand and to try to leverage on the peculiarity of the digital humanities research approach. I think, and also we can bring knowledge from these other domains, and I think this is a value that we can offer. But why we are here, communication design and digital humanities, why we are working together? We proposed it because that was a decision. This could have been a meeting for the working group 6. We decided to have a training school, and I strongly pushed the idea to transform this training school into a workshop. So that was a decision. It changed also some of the bureaucracy behind, but it was, I think, I really believe that was the right decision. Why? Well, first, because we have this natural tendency as designers to, mix with other disciplines, and so we love working with other disciplines together. So that's something that is really part of our nature. But we saw also from your side in many publications, in many papers and conferences about digital humanities, a kind of a call to action to design, especially communication design, that we couldn't ignore. So I have plenty of quotations that come from your side that ask, in a way, for working together. So, but what is interesting is that there is this kind of a call to action to learn and confront digital humanities and communication design, but there is no clear understanding on how it should happen. And more often than not, what happens is that you try to do design, but without designers, as someone says. This is famous for us, but it's true. It's true that there is this kind of will of engage with the design approach, but more often than not, it's without really working together on that side. So the vocabulary of digital humanities is full of terms that we share, or that are part of our vocabulary. And it's quite incredible how much we share, even in terms of language. I mean, it's all about representation, visualization, aesthetics, usability, user experience. And I have in mind, this conference for me was enlightening. That's where I really understood that we have to work together. And I don't know if anybody of you participated in that. But again, that was a statement, for me, a strong statement. Learning from communication design, interaction design will be vital I don't know if you share it, but for me it was a kind of a really big call to action. But no one ever said how it should happen. On a certain point, we had the chance to try to find a way, and that was our collaboration as a research lab with the Stanford Humanities Center. We started, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, probably more, working on the Republic of Letters. And what is interesting is that this kind of a promiscuity that we tried to build based on our nature was a 3-step process. We started, I would say, naturally, or maybe in a kind of an opportunistic way, adapting some of the tools we were developing for other fields. And that's where, for example, we started playing with networks in different ways, using these tools, but it was created for other reasons. We adapted this Fineo tool, and maybe Tommaso will show you later that, for the humanists, but it was not conceived for that. It was a tool born for other reasons that we adapted in this first collaboration with humanists. They were excited using this tool, but at the same time, we were more and more aware of the limits of something that was not conceived, thinking to the peculiarities of the humanistic inquiry process. So you can see here some of your words, I mean, communities, gender, exploratories, that we tried to represent the milieu as a concept with this visualization, but it didn't work fully. So we made something more. So we decided that it was a tool deserving customized tools, so tools that were meant to support the specific nature of humanistic inquiry processes. So we started working not only with Stanford Humanities Center, but with other centers studying Kant in Italy, developing tools for them, specific tools. So this is an example of how we let humanities scholar playing with the words. The database was the entire Kant opera, and so we tried to make sense of some algorithms for analyzing this ensemble of the relationship between the words. In some cases it worked, in some others not. That's one of the cases where some spatialization algorithms work. So this is a representation of, well, this is all the relationship. Here you see the words that are only mentioned once in all the opera of Kant, the unique words. So you have this kind of chaos in the middle and all around this important information. But then we ended up with a kind of a physical artifact. This is a kind of a poster, very big. It's like a map that they use to see how changed the use of certain words during the years in the different operas of Kant. That was one of the first customized tools. And then also with the Stanford Humanities Center, we started developing with Giorgio Caviglia some tools for them, customized, based on that process. And this is an example, is inquiry. This is ink. These are all components that nowadays you can find in Palladio that were used. But again, even if it was customized, there were some limits that we understood we couldn't overcome alone. That's where we started the third stage that was really collaborating. I mean, physically together. So adaptation was not enough. Doing something for them, but remotely was not enough. The third stage of this collaboration was really working together. So we started with some kind of summer school, summer workshops, and then at the end, some designers went there and started working together with the humanists. So what we want to reproduce here is this part of the relationship that really, really worked. And that's something that really produced the most important outcome of this relationship came up only when we decided to really physically sharing the same problem from the beginning. And that's something that only can take place, can happen if you have the chance to meet and work since the beginning together. I think there is no other way. That's where some of the most interesting ideas, I think, born, for example, the idea of working constructively, I would say, with data. And so that's something that is behind Knot, that is again another component of Palladio. So the most interesting outcomes really are the fruit of this physical collaboration together. And that's where at the end we found that the best representation of this collaboration was this panorama with all the people physically together in the same space. I think that's really the real representation of what we have done. We have created a physical space where we were able to collaborate. And there is no chance, I think, to have the same results without this collaboration. So, if communication design and digital humanities, or vice versa, has a chance to create something, this is also has to be working together, but in a practical way. So what we want to do in this week is to really create something. So at the end, what we expect is something that can be, in a way, evaluated, can be shared, and is a tangible result of this physical cooperation that we will have in this week. How we will do that? We will use a specific format that has been created, or that we experimented in a European project, the EMAPS project I was mentioning before. It started, in our case, in 2013. And we had this, for the first time, this format that we called Sprint. The design sprint is the format that we will use in these 5 days. It's something that we, from a certain point after 2013, we used regularly in the European project, and it was quite successful. At the point that Google copied it, this is the design sprint version from Google. Well, I'm not sure they copied, but the book that talked about this format is from 2016 now. So it's a methodology that has some, I think, some good points, and there are many ways to describe it. I mean, it's all based on 5 days as a time frame. You obviously have the typical phases for the design process, but that's something that we would like to do. But probably we will not have so much time to test at the end, but you are, in a way, in most of the cases, you are the real users. So you are, maybe it's more than testing, you are part of the co-design process of this visualization. So we will start for sure today. The first session is dedicated to understanding the research question behind what we want to see. What is the sense that we want to make together through data and visualization? Probably we will diverge, I don't know when. Then, one of the most important points is to prototype what we mean. So it's not necessarily coding, could be, depends on the level of the different groups and the ideas, but to make something that is tangible and can be evaluated in a way and tested. So something that is a kind of a physical evidence of the sense that you want to make, and that can be shared. As I said, there are many different ways of representing this format, but I'm not sure we don't have to fit with all these diagrams. What's important is that we go from understanding the research question to something that can be shared and evaluated in some way. So that's what we expect in this time. And let me say something about design more specifically in the field of data visualization, communication design especially. One of the frustrations that we often feel when we work with other people, other clients, or in other disciplines is that normally they think that there is a phenomenon, and you know your phenomenon, that from this phenomenon you have data, that's what you bring, and then that you want to create a visualization out of this data that is a representation of the phenomenon. More often than not, these people come with data, even sometimes hiding the phenomenon. So thinking that this is not important for the visualization process. They just come with the data, in most of the cases, organized data, structured data. So with a certain level of formal organization, and then they expect that we do something translation of that. And so the designer here is in between the data and the visualization. Well, that's not true. That's not our way of working with data visualization. As we are designers, we are not computer scientists, so information and data visualization, they also come from science, as it was that is the origin. But in our case, designers are here first. We are here first. We want to know what you are talking about, what is behind the data. If we don't know that, we cannot help you in making sense of this phenomenon. We want to be here. We want to see the data at a certain point, sure, but these data are the raw data that maybe we are all able to extract from the phenomenon together. So one of the possible results of this workshop could be that you change your idea on the data. So maybe this is not all. Maybe you can add something because we have an image or a visualization in mind. So that's also part of the process. So, and this is the most interesting phase for us, where we start a dialogue between design and a domain expert. You are the domain expert in this case. We use visualization also as a way to try to discuss the phenomenon. So we want to know something about what is behind the data through visualization, and then after that, we go through the data. So what I would suggest today, maybe but forget for a moment the data. Before that, you will have 1 hour as groups. Before talking about the data, please use 15 to 20 minutes to talk about what is behind the data and to share that with the designers. They will understand, I guarantee you. They will get, I think, your point. After that, you say, okay, these are the data. This is the data that I have as a kind of a partial representation of that. And so what we can do, then we start iterating, using visualization to, try to transform this data because there is a research question on it. And that's something, again, that is much more fruitful if you do it together with the domain expert. Visualization as a way, an iterative process that you share with the domain expert. Well, what does it mean normally? It means that there is a very important issue for us when we work with clients in asking their time. That's something that they don't understand. You have to put your time in the process. They say, okay, I pay you for data visualization, so I should be there. But that's not the point. If you are not part of the process, especially when we're talking about strategic problems, talking about what is the future of my industry, what is the future of my domain, what is, in this kind of problems, you cannot make sense of the data without the knowledge of the expert. That's something I would like to reproduce in a workshop. So let's start from the phenomenon, then we go to the data, but with some images in mind, and then we iterate on the data as much as possible using, again, visualization as a tool for ourselves before being something for someone else, okay? So I wanted to outline, to stress this point, because it's something that happened, again, in the European project I was mentioning before. We spent months to discuss how we should be part of the process. Because when they decided to have us in the European project as partners, we had the typical idea of data visualization. And we started playing in that way, but it didn't work. When we started having success, it's only after we decided to stop a bit and to really reflect on what could be the role of design and visualization. And we succeeded, I would say, in creating, but it's a post on the blog of the European project. It's a result, I would say, how sociology and design can work together, using visualization and data to make sense of a phenomenon. So that's something that I think is a result. So another expectation that I have is that we achieve something like that for the relationship that design and digital humanities, communication design and digital humanities can have. because there is a lot that has been written, especially from the perspective of the digital humanities scholars. There isn't that much from the perspective of designers. And I think that is kind of a common model for the right way these two disciplines should collaborate would be an interesting result of the cross-section itself. So, I don't promise anything I can't promise. So, I don't pretend you becoming designers, neither us becoming humanist scholars. But I think that could be a very, apart from the cross-section itself, really what we can expect to achieve is to create a kind of a shared understanding of the vocabulary, but also this mutual respect that I think is very important, and well, that can lead hopefully also to collaboration. Technically speaking, what I expect at the end of the week is what is normally called a POC, proof of concept. So a proof of concept with a proof is that you should be able to find a value, and this value should be proved in a way by something that is tangible and it could be evaluated in some way. So the proof should be visual, of course, and could be interactive or not, depending on the skills of the group. But it should be something that is a proof of a value that can be constructed, co-constructed, co-designed by the two disciplines together. Well, that's an aim, and I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit ambitious, but why not? So we're here for. But I think it's really I think it's a very special, unique opportunity we have, and I would like really to start with the right approach. I don't know what you think. We can discuss it. It's a questionable approach, but I think it's the right way. So, one level. 5 minutes for questions, please, after giving the floor to Nancy. Does it make sense what I say?
Can you go back to that slide where you said what is by day to day? First understanding, then sketching, then deciding.
Yeah, but don't stick too much to this.
No, I just want to see what you.
But there are many diagrams describing the
sketching, deciding, prototyping, validating. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but that's a different way, but because it's becoming a format, and I think there are some strength in this format and the idea of the 5 days a week and these phases. But of course, I think we can invent also our version for design and digital humanities working together. But for sure, these 2 days is very important and how we start. So please do not start only with data. So spend some time discussing and sharing the research question. Your aim in general, not only with the visualization. Okay, because I think it's very important. Someone from the design field, or other people from density design or other. Maybe I'm talking about density design approach, so maybe it's not necessarily the same of others. So if there are other designers that want to add something or just say yes, I agree. Yes. Just to know if we are aligned. Or...
No, yes. On the sprint format, well, I think that this workshop is really a test, and actually one of the outcomes of this week will be to define if it's useful to use the sprint method in this context, because actually I think it's the first time that we do it as density design, a sprint with digital humanities.
Sure.
It's the first time. So as Paolo was saying, I mean, this is a format for designing stuff, usually products, and here we are not really designing products, but we think that we can adapt it for this context, and well, we have to understand how to adapt it. So I think that the work week will be really sort of an experimentation.
Yeah, there's a method of it's the validation on the screen method within this context also.
Yeah, I mean, following up on what Michael is saying, it is important to know how strict it is, because on the one hand, you want to have something at the end of the process, which can be validated as a proof of concept. At the same time, you need to invest a lot of time in the discussion what you're actually talking about. So there's also, but yeah, very often in an agenda for a meeting that you just say, okay, you have so much time allocated for this topic, you have so much time allocated for another topic. So how rigid is it? Because I can imagine that you sometimes need more time to get it clear, and that you end some valuable design time, or that you said, okay, now we have discussed enough, and now we continue.
Well, I had the chance to, let's say, pre-experiment something similar a month ago, more or less. I was invited in Georgia Tech in Atlanta to, and we did a workshop, Digital Humanities plus Design, in 1 day and a half. Okay. I was really impressed by what came up at the end. So in such a short time, everybody, and I think it's part of the role of designers, everybody, every group had something to show, something to test, something to validate in a kind of a soft way, but it was 1 day and a half.
Yeah.
But we started the dinner before the starting date to discuss, but really was a discussion about, I mean, what do you think, what is your research about, what is your angle, what is your aim, what are you searching for? And then the day after, we started working with data. And as soon as possible, people that were able to do that, they created some very rough visualizations, but just, but as learning, or I don't know how to call it, just ways of sharing thoughts on the data. And then at the end, nobody really came up with something for sharing. It was semi-finished, let's say, proofs, but it was something shareable, something visible and tangible in a way.
This communication, which I will have, especially in the first day, to get the idea it's clear. I mean, we are now basically we all have laptops and that sort of stuff, but I quite like working with pencils, for instance. Sure. Flip overs and that sort of stuff. Is that available? Because very often you have to explain your ID just on paper, and then it can be,
will be available.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Today is
exactly.
That's the tool for today.
Yeah. Okay.
So please don't use your laptops.
No. Okay.
Only paper and pencils. I mean, or something like that. Yeah, sure, you're right. Okay. I'm sure that it was our.
Can you give us a more concrete idea of the range of sort of outcomes that you would ideally like to see, or perhaps just a variety of outcomes?
Well, the range could be really broad, I mean, because in the case I was mentioning before, we had someone as my group, we had the chance to have a very open-minded coding person that was really translating more or less real time in D3 or JavaScript the thing we were talking about. And so at the end, we had an interactive prototype with some not innovative visualizations, but visualizations that were meant to describe, let's say, the points we wanted to address. In other cases, you just had layouts. In some cases, really sketches, but with a clear idea of what should have been the final translation of the. But it really depends on the groups. So it's quite difficult to. But what I would like something that is shareable, understandable, that is clear, and that could be shared and discussed after. But the value should be clear. So why? What is the point in doing that? So what is the value that was not available before that we are bringing to, and then
By shareable, do you mean inside this group, or do you also mean
No, outside.
within the broader? Yes, good.
Outside.
Okay. Because that's very
Shareable,
important.
yeah,
I mean,
outside.
what we're trying to do is get a discussion going, which can then stimulate further discussions as other groups of people come together, because this is clearly a major enterprise, and however fast we sprint, and humanists aren't very good at sprinting, we tend to be sort of long distance experts. However far we get in a week, it has to be a starting place for further inquiry. And it'd be lovely to see this, so that we're stimulating lots of action resistance.
Yeah, it should look like as a solution. So that's something that address this point, that bring this value. What do you think about it? That should be understandable and clear.
So we're talking about problems, and then analyzing those problems in search for solutions, and then sketching out.
Yeah.
Maybe one or more ways.
Yeah, with sketching meaning different things.
Yes.
From
Yes.
With sketching to coding,
Analyzing.
sketching,
Yeah.
and so you can sketch with different languages. Let's say visual languages. So depending on the groups. And also depending on the questions, because in some cases you don't need that much. The interactive, I don't know, it depends really. But yeah, sure.
Please tell me if this question belongs to a later stage. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges for visualization for history is visualization of time. And I noticed in the presentation that I don't see any dynamic or interactivity per se, like, is there like a principle behind it? I mean, I don't see like YouTube,
Well, most of the things that I show you very quickly, that they are dynamic and interactive. So I just show pictures.
No, sorry, I should better explain. When, I'm thinking about a scrollable,
Yeah,
you have that. And
it's
okay.
Yeah, but it's not something, let's say, special in a way. So it's part of the possibilities.
Yeah.
When you transform this data, you can transform that, even including time and so it's I would say it's normal and obvious to include in a way time and dynamics and interactive. So I think any designer that will be part of a group has in mind something that is closer to an experience more than just a visualization. So I don't think that more often than not, we start thinking to interactive and dynamic things more than just flat and static visualizations. I think it's part of the transformation of the relationship with the data. So it's part of, I think, of the.
No, I just don't
I didn't show anything moving, but it's more or less it's always something dynamic and interactive, or there's some form of interaction with the data. Like time is, so often it's a fundamental part of.
Okay.
Sure, you can also represent that time in a in a static way, but no problem on that point.
I want just to add one thing. It's quite quick, and because you're talking about designers and humanists, but actually here we have also other kind of profiles, maybe the more hybrid profiles, so with the on the technical side, and I think that it's quite relevant, the reason why we invited them, and we try to invite as many as possible people able to actually code and work
because
with the data.
It's a bias.
I know. And I think that it's really important because, as a designer, when I think, for example, to a network, I draw on a paper a very nice network with a nice connection and everything. It's really simple to read. And then when I put the data inside that kind of visualization, it's a furball and it's impossible to understand it. And it's a
really important point. It's the same with also with the bar chart visualization. If I do a bar chart visualization, for sure I will put very well distributed values, and actually when I put the real values, I get nothing for half of the visualization, then brown data, and then all the rest in 3 lines. And so that's the reason why we want to work directly with your, and actually it's the reason why we asked to bring the data, and we want to work directly on your data, so on real cases, and to create prototypes that are not generic solution to problems, but are specific solution for your problems, your research questions.
Yeah, but you know that is the result of a bias I have. So in my dream, these 2 figures.
I know that they are the same.
Yeah,
I know.
So when I think to a designer in this area, I think someone that is a combination. So I hope that will happen. This kind of transmutation of the two. So this capability to code is, of course, if a designer has this capability on its own. So we will transform Giovanni into coding into design. So we'll infuse some design to him and some of his coding capabilities to someone else. But we have some hybrid. I mean, if I see here,
I think that most of the
Marco is an example of this hybrid,
Yeah,
or Glauco is they start from different. This is interesting because they started from different points and they are converging in this. So we have representations of these figures, this profile I aim to when we work with data. So that's why I say only design, but in design, there are these 2 competencies together. Okay.
I was going to ask, in your experience, how often have the most satisfactory outputs resulted from answering a specific initial question? And how far have those questions become transformed into something that humans, for example, you see something valuable in at the end, but isn't what you're aiming to ask?
In my experience, it happens like so that the more precise and clear is the question at the beginning, especially in short time, the more you have a chance to have something valuable. So that's why I say, okay, please spend some time today to share the question, to work on the question, maybe to reformulate the question in a different way. But if you have a clear goal for the sprint, I mean, in the sprint is the brief that comes from the company. But in our case, it's different, but we have to have a clear, and that's something that I would like to see in the presentation this evening. So it should be 1 sentence. You can change that tomorrow morning. Today should be clear. So that's what I want to achieve. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to explore. That's the kind of knowledge and information I want to have as a result. Then, so we know, and you know as a group, what is the goal. Then you go with all the different tools straight to the point. And it happens that you change it, but and of course, this is given the time. Maybe at the end you realize, or at the end of the day, you realize that it's not 100% the exact question. But I think that a good compromise is better than a good question but without an answer. So I think that's because we want also to test the process in itself. So I don't know if you share the same idea, but for me it's maybe I would sacrifice a bit of the question in a way in order to have a process that comes to an end. So that's my thought. So even if it's not 100%, it's 90% your question, but you see that you can have something at the end. Because I mean, the starting point, I think it's, I hope we will have other chances to work together in that way. So
it's a similar choice. If you write an article, you very often can't solve everything in one article, so you have to make a decision as well then. So.
Yeah, so please consider the same issue here.
Okay. So, Tommaso?
I will be very quickly because we do not have so much time till lunch. But basically, what I want to do is just to talk a little more closer about some of the projects that Paolo described before. When we as designers are thinking about the work that we can do for scholars and the humanities, we basically think about three kinds of artifacts. And usually they are digital because we're working with data and because of digital form is more easy to share. The first one is related to the archives. And when we are talking about archives, we always think about these places with a huge amount of resources. Sometimes we imagine them as dusty. And there are people who are in charge of taking care about this resourcing, and so on. Well, sometimes we are called in order to support the creation of the digital version of these archives. So there are people who are translating or converting these things into data and into digital formats. And well, when this content is digitized, then we can say that we have sort of new kind of possibilities to work with this. And sometimes this ends up with this sort of archives where you have just a search bar and you can just type inside what you're looking for and then you get it really quickly. But the fact that we get it quickly is not really something that we can say that it's new that we can get from this digital material. Because actually the access to the resource is still quite similar to the one before. We need to know in advance what we want to look for. And yeah, we can take it with this bar. But what we can do, for example, is to communicate what's inside the archive to show the relationships between the resources. And this problem was addressed in 2004 with this book by Schragen, Siemens, and Answorth. And yes, they were saying that they were addressing the capability of doing an entirely kind of things with this digital data. And especially with those data that are attached to those resources, which are called metadata. When the designer wants to do something like this, we are thinking about making new kind of interfaces that are able to show these relationships and this content of the archive, even to someone which maybe is not an expert on the field. And we tried to do this in a project which is called Lomen, which is from 2011. And well, in this project, well, I say we, but it wasn't part of it. That they tried to envision a new sort of archive, which is digital, and which was able to communicate the work of an Italian architect whose name was Luciano Baldessari. And well, they did it visually, starting from a page where you can find the thumbnails of all these works. But this is not enough, we said before. We wanted to show the relationships. We wanted to use the metadata. So, for example, we can think about timeline.
we can think about a map, or we can even think about a network with the people that collaborated to the projects. Well, these things gives you some insights on the material that you have. And well, it's not that it's better to look at this visualization instead of looking to the single resource, to the single document, but it is just different. You are looking at your material from a different point of view. And well, in this way, we believe that this visualization can provoke new kind of questions. We can get different insights. These interfaces was defined as generous interfaces by Mitchell Whitelow, and this was what I was just telling before. And well, when we want to provoke these new questions, we may think about adding new features to the archives that we saw before. But sometimes you might want to have more room for exploration, for going deeper into your work. And in order to address this kind of needs, you might think about specific tools for your work. And tools are the second kind of artifacts that we were talking about before. Density design started in realizing this kind of tools in collaboration with the Stanford University during the project Mapping the Republic of Letters. And of course, all these tools and the data that we are going to talk in a while are about visualization of letters. Well, the first one is Fineo, that we just see briefly before. And well, Fineo presents itself like this way, and it was a tool designed for representing the mail exchanges, and then was readapted in order to display the data from letters, from the Republic of Letters. This tool draws from an old visual model, it was called Sankey, and it was used to show the flows of things like energy, material, monies, and so on. And you see the visualization tool is able to display the element in this sort of tiled-up networks, where you have axis that represents the dimension of the data set. They tried to apply this tool to this particular case studies from Athanasius Kircher, who was a German scholar, you probably know better than we do. And this data set contained almost 2,000 letters between these scholars and 760 correspondents, and had a certain amount of dimensions. Well, they applied this case study in Fineo, and well, in this way it was pretty straightforward to understand how the dataset was composed, which language was the one that was most used, what about the gender, and some questions arose. For example, who is this female, and in this huge amount of male writers. Well, some unexpected and some questions of this kind arose from this project. Another project is called Inquiry, and it was still on letters and it's still in collaboration with the Stanford University. This time the designers tried to draw from the past experience with Fineo. And well, they started with the design of this tool with some pillars in mind. First of all, they decided to do not have any entry points, so they wanted to have like a white screen, an empty screen. Then they wanted the user to be able to compose different views at the same time. So for example, a chart, a map. And they wanted him to be able to select just a portion of the data, and they wanted this selection to be recursive in the other views. They thought that it was useful to have a direct access to the documents. So if you see some element that was relevant in the implementation, you could understand where it comes from. And the last thing is that they wanted to show the letters that cannot be shown in the visualization. So if there is some inconsistency in the data set because of the data are sometimes not clear, yeah, they didn't want to lose this aspect, but they want to preserve it. Okay, and so we're saying that the tool presents itself like an empty interface, and then you can go and choose some visualization, some view, sorry, and well, you get it visualized. I can show you maybe here. You can, for example, decide to visualize all the authors or all the recipients. And there's the tool presenting to you. And then you can add another view. For example, the destination. So you have a map. Okay. What was interesting in this tool is that they realized that the interface and the visualization wasn't just a way to communicate the results of your research, but it was a tool that you can use to put your hands on the data and to learn more about it. It's like you can learn different things from reading a map or making a map, and this is just the process that was fostered from this kind of tool. Okay, the last project, not the last, but another project is called Knot. And, well, Knot starts from a different perspective from the one before. It was designed with the purpose of exploring the social network of people of the Republic of Letters, but they wanted to give a different perspective. In the case of before, we just choose a dimension of the data set and we got it plotted into our view entirely. In this case, they wanted a more subjective approach. So they wanted just to start from what the researcher or the user knows, and then drawing the graph or the chart starting from that point. So it's still starting with an empty interface, but then you can decide to look with this search bar for a particular person and trying to visualize the network that this person is was having in the Republic of Letters, let's say. And in this way, you can build up a network starting from your knowledge, and you can even add elements based on the relationships that are inside the dataset. Okay, this is the last project, and well, this was part of my master thesis. And instead of being based on letters, this is designed in order to deal with political speeches and with data that Giovanni gave us. Political speeches are interesting because you can learn things about the people that were talking, but even about the people that were listening to the speakers, and about society and things like this. The tool tries to combine the aspect that we saw before, and we wanted to give a brief introduction with a summary, and then we wanted to have 3 different views able to display the three main dimensions of the data set that we have, which was the number of words and their use, the people recognized inside the text, and the places where the speeches took place, and the places where they were referring inside the speeches. And then one last view, which is sort of concordances that wanted to present the content of the dataset in a similar way to what as we saw before. So this is the first view, the one that is talking about the in the dataset. And basically, what you can see here are the keywords inside the dataset, and they are on the left. If they have more affinity with one speaker, or on the right if they have more affinity with the other. As you can see, the bigger ones, which are the ones used more, are in the center, and probably they are regarding some hot thematic of the time. Then we have a network, which is not really tidied up, so we tried to envision some way in order to make it more readable, or easy to read. So we imagined some tools for removing, for example, the labels or removing the links in order to get it more easy to read. And this is a network about the people that were mentioned inside the speeches. So if they are blue, they are from one speaker, and if they are red, they are from another speaker. And if they are gray, they are mentioned by both. And the last view for exploration is this one, which is a sort of map. As you can see, those are the speeches and the places where they took place. And unfortunately, you cannot see it really good because the projector is not showing it, but there are the places all over the world that are highlighted, which with blue or red, depending on the references they have inside the speeches. Okay, and then this last view is about the words that are inside the speeches. So this view at the beginning is empty, as I said before, and then you can choose a reference term. In this case, it is today, and then you can go and see which are all the sentences where today appears, and you can decide to compare it with some other words, for example, in this case, to begin, and see if there is some particular relation inside the dataset. Okay, so that was the last project of density design, and then I would like to talk about another project, which is based on a different approach. And the project that we saw are all projects that are, let's say, inside the process of understanding the content of the dataset and of the phenomenon that you are trying to explore, to make some research about. But there is another project which is called Recogito, which I found interesting, and which is maybe addressing one of the requests that you talked before. And well, Recogito is about mapping the geographical places, especially the ones that are not existing anymore. So if you're talking about something that happens in a place of the ancient Greece, for example, you cannot find it on, for example, Google Maps or OpenStreetMap. So they envisioned this tool for addressing this particular issue. And it's quite simple to use. You can start from the text, you can highlight the name of places, you can do the same for maps, and then you can say to the program where is the place that that the author was referring to the place. Well, this is pretty interesting because then you can have even a different perspective on those ancient texts. And yeah, the last kind of artifact are the reports. And well, all of these tools that we saw before are for producing some results, for making exploration. They are inside the process of exploring, but sometimes you want even to communicate those results. And in order to do that, we made some projects, maybe collaboration with newspapers. For example, this one of that was describing the
world of Francesco Algarotti. And well, this was based on a work done in collaboration with humanists and using different tools. We then they had made sort of map that was published on some newspaper, which is called Corriere della Sera. Okay, thank you.
How does it work for the lunch?
Well, for lunch, it's up to you. There are plenty of places around here. Then we have highlighted some of the welcome package. You're just free to go and lunch where you want to.
At what time we have to be here?
At 2 o'clock.
Then we start again.
Okay.
Okay, at 2 o'clock we have the top charts, right?
Yeah.
B#. We have them start working on it.